Well, I came back here, let's see, I think then I started wrestling here, and I met Wild Red Barry in Joplin, Missouri.
Right.
He was home on a holiday, and when he saw me, he went back and told Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Mondt about this young kid back here that was going to be a star. And so I'm down in Wichita Falls, Texas at a 4-H barn arena that didn't even have a telephone. Didn't even have bathrooms in the dressing room. Nasty, filthy place wrestling. The cops came and got me. Said I had an emergency call, and I thought, gee whiz, something must be wrong with my parents. When I got there, the number they gave me was in Washington, D.C., and it was Vince McMahon and Toots Mondt, and they said, Wild Red Barry says you're going to be a star. We want you. We want you to be on TV next Thursday in Washington. I said, well, you'll have to call Mr. McGurk and ask him. They said, you just get your bags packed. We'll take care of Mr. McGurk. So when I saw Leroy the next day, he said, you're on the way to Washington. So I went to Washington, and that's where I started my career back east. And I didn't even understand it. They'd had me on 5 TVs a week. I'm starving to death. And Red Barry took me and let me live in his apartment with him because he said, they're making you a star. You don't even realize it. And so that's what happened. And that's where I got started there. And the first big match I had was with Killer Kowalski in Washington, D.C. It was a 20-minute Broadway, and we tore the joint down, and that made me a star to go 20 minutes Broadway with Killer Kowalski. That's how big a star he was. But we had a phenomenal, and Vince and them were there. They booked Killer and I everywhere. I think we went against each other 4 times in Washington, D.C. And so that's what happened. And then, of course, I met Bruno Sammartino.
You just set a tennis record at MSG.
Yeah, and Bruno Sammartino was a different human being. He was truly, I don't say was, he is so high quality. He is such a phenomenal guy. He had such a feel for people, and we just became instant friends, and we tag teamed for about a year. Then we came up with an angle that set all box office records, and it was Bruno Sammartino was really an important person in my life.
Why did you leave that promotion?
I always believed in leaving on top. And I'd done what I thought I needed to do there, and so I wanted to go other places. I guess I had this yearning to learn more, not realizing, and I never realized at that point I was going to be a promoter. So I went back and went to work for Roy Shires in San Francisco. And I worked for Roy Shires for a little over a year, and that was a great education. Shires was a genius. I think his only problem was he didn't know how to delegate anything. You never knew anything. He never asked you your opinion. He never incorporated your mind in anything. And so what I learned under him was he was a genius and he had great control, but he didn't really know how to get people bigger than they were because he didn't include them.
Right.
So that was a very formative period of time. And of course, then I got to wrestle with Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson was learning under Ray Stevens at the time. Ray Stevens was, nobody could touch him. And then I had a tag partner named Jim Haiti, who was phenomenal. And later Joe Scarpa, who became Jay Strongbow.
Right.
And that's where I met Thunderbolt Patterson. And
I think Piper was down there, but maybe that was afterwards.
No, Roddy wasn't there yet.
After.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was, and I got Cyclone Negron. I wrestled against Fritz Von Erich and, a lot of dynamite talent. I became Shire's champion and stayed there. And the trips were so short, I was bored. I was used to working every night of the week and traveling my ass off, and all of a sudden I'd be home every night and make good money. So, but it was a real learning period of time for me there too under Shires. And then I went to Japan. Then I came back, and then I quit the business. I got into a network marketing company because I wanted to see what I could do. I wanted to know if I could build a business outside the wrestling business in case something happened to me. I was always one of these people that continued education. I was taking my CPA stuff by correspondence and different things like that, because I realized that 2 things: if it didn't work out or you got that debilitating injury, you were at that mercy. So I quit the business for a little over a year and did very well in this company. And then I came back in and I went up for Verne Gagne. And Gagne was a real education, a really important guy in my life, a guy that I respect so much, a challenging guy. Gagne is a challenging guy. The friendship was there, but also the challenge was always there. He would always see how much shit he could make you take before you lash back at him. He just wanted to check you, but he was a class guy. He could see the big picture so well. He was terrible about details. So I was learning from Shires the details, and I mean Shires the details. I mean Shires told you how to do your interview. He told you step by step what he wanted, And then he had the greatest executioner in the world in Ray Stevens out there to execute the matches, and fabulous talent. And Shire's was the opposite of the East Coast. Shire's was high-packed energy in the matches, lots of bumps, lots of action. Whereas the East Coast was the old formula. They put the nobody against the star and pound, 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 pound. So I was seeing different aspects. And then Gagne was in between there, where the guys did more of their expression on their interviews. But he had Larry Hennig, who is one of the all-time greats, and he was teamed with Harley Race.
Right.
So that was a completely different team than Patterson and Stevens, but still such an awesome team. And the Crusher Lazowski could get a match out of anybody. So he had this way of taking anybody and picking out their strong point and capitalizing on it. So that was an awesome thing to learn. And of course, Dick Beyer was there as Dr. X, and Dick Beyer is a phenomenal person as well as wrestler. So I got exposed to all of that talent there. There was so many. I'm sure I'm forgetting them, but these people made deep impressions. And then Leroy called me crying and drunk and wanted me to come back because his territory was on the deal and this and that and the other. And I said, all right, I'll come back, and if you'll let me be your partner. And then he got scared, so then he wanted Verne and Fritz to be his partner, and then they offered me 5%, and I said, screw you guys. I'm going to go do the work for, no. And so I quit Verne, and I said, Leroy, I'll come home and make my own deal with you. So they panicked about that. So anyway, I got 19%, they got 20 and 20, and Hodge got 10, and Leroy had this and that, and I worked here. And finally, I worked here, and I mean, this was like...
So that you were wrestling and starting the book?
Yeah,
to do more.
This was like the death area. There was no talent.
Right.
It was horrible. The weather was horrible. The economy was horrible. And Leroy was surrounded so deep with stooges that sucked up to him and would go in and tear down everything you did. It was so hard, but we still made money and got it going. And Dutch Savage was the first big name that would come home, and he worked here and gave me his heart. And boy, and then the weather was so bad, he finally said, I've done all I can. I'll give you a 5-week notice. I said, Dutch, we're going to sell out every night on your way out. I'm sorry, you're going to miss it. And we did.
Right.
And then the next guy that came in that was huge was, of course, Gary Hart and the Spoiler. And then Waldo Von Erich. And of course, Gary Hart was the greatest manager at that time. And the Spoiler was an awesome. And so by then we were getting into it, and I was learning and learned more and more, and we had it really, really going. But I got so sick and tired of dealing with Leroy and all his negativeness and the drunkenness and all the stuff that you had to do to deal with it, that it was tearing me down inside, where I was questioning my own knowledge and my own values. So about that time, there was that deal happening in Georgia, and Eddie Graham had been watching me. And Eddie was such a student, and he was watching me, and he wanted me to get involved with him. But the thing came up in Georgia where Gunkel had double-crossed his partners, and then he dropped dead of a heart attack, so his wife and his booker decided to go on, and all the guys double-crossed except one guy. One guy stayed with Paul Jones in the promotion. That guy's name was Bob Armstrong, who was a quality guy. And so Eddie brought me in the start of this, what they used to call a war then. And,
right.
And I worked on that first card that the NWA put together, and then he says, I want you to come here and work for me in Florida, but he said, I want you to go to Georgia first. So he gave me my stock in Georgia as a gift to go work there, and he made me the real power in the dressing room and everything, but he had his ex-partner Lester Welch and his son running the business on the front, and Leo Garibaldi was the booker. So we kept trying to work through Leo, and Leo had a tremendous mind, but he just did stupid shit. So we'd always have to override him, and we started selling out and doing huge business, and that's where Eddie and I really got so close, and that's where I understood what a genius Eddie Graham was. I learned so much from him, but I got to work with Tim Woods, who was great. Mr. Wrestling 2 was phenomenal. Some with Thunderbolt Patterson, and that's also was intriguing me about the black athlete and trying to figure out how to capitalize on working with the black athlete. And Thunderbolt had so much talent, but he carried so many burdens of the things that had happened to him in his life that he was unstable. You never knew what he was going to do.
Right.
And of course, Gary Hart and Bobby Duncan was my tag partner, who was like the Rock of Gibraltar, and Jerry Oates. I mean, we just had a good crew, and that was what a wrestling area it was. And so through all this, it was really great. And then Barnett wanted to come back out of Australia, so they sold him a part of the Georgia thing, and he took over Georgia, and then I went to Florida in '74 and booked Florida for Eddie. and Dusty Rhodes was down there, who I'd had some experience with Dusty already, and that's where I really developed Dusty into being an American Dream.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.